I want to preface this story by stating that I've had my fair share of encounters with creepy men. This situation, however, scared the life out of me. It's the first time I genuinely felt like my life was in danger. My husband and I had to drive 17 hours last week to North Carolina for a wedding. It was an exhausting week, and we basically spent the entire time rushing from one family gathering to another. We were staying in a hotel for the time we were there. We had already been at this motel for a few days by the time the day of the actual wedding rolled around. The day of the wedding was hectic. We were rushing around trying to get ready to leave for the venue. My husband got ready before me so he could do some last-minute things before we had to leave. That left me alone in our motel room to get ready before he returned. It was brutally hot outside, and I decided to do my hair and makeup in just my underwear, so I wouldn't be sweating in my nice dress the whole time. The way this motel was laid out, the sink mirror were in the general open area of the room, with the toilet and shower in another room, so anyone walking by our room window could see me standing at the mirror. However, I did have the curtains closed, but these curtains were a little bit sheer, so you could technically see the shadow of someone walking by on the outside, or could maybe see the silhouette of me inside the room. I was curling my hair in the mirror when I noticed the silhouette of a man walking by my room window. As he's passing my window, I see him stop and start trying to look into my window. At first I thought it was my husband trying to see if I was ready, so I paid no mind to it. But the longer the guy stood there, bobbing his head around trying to get a better look through the curtains, I began to realize it was not my husband, because obviously, why wouldn't he just come in? Now I'm starting to get a little freaked out. Before I could do anything though, I watched as this guy started to go for my room door. My utter shock and horror came when he actually was able to open the door and walked inside. Before my husband left, he forgot to pull the door shut all the way till it clicked into its lock. He was very upset at himself when I told him this later. So now I am face to face with this man, and I'm in my underwear no less, who's at least 6 feet tall, and standing in my room. I thought to myself, this is it. He's going to attack you. That's a very scary realization to have. I also thought to myself, you're going to have to burn his eye sockets out with this curling iron if you want to survive. For a few seconds, probably only a second or two, but it felt a lot longer, he just stood there staring at me like I was a piece of meat and he was starving, ready to pounce on me like prey. He then began to smile the most evil-looking, toothy grin I've ever seen and started mumbling something under his breath. I couldn't make out what he was saying completely, but I did make out the words, "pretty lady," and "come here." I don't know if it was the fight or flight response, but I suddenly got pissed and I charged towards him, ready to strike him with my hot curling iron. I screamed as loud as I could, "Get the fuck out of here!" It must have startled him because he jumped back out onto the balcony of the motel. I saw this as my chance, and I ran for the door. I luckily was able to get to the door and slam it shut right before he was about to make his second attempt at entering inside. I immediately collapsed on the floor, sobbing. I literally was too scared to move from that spot until my husband came back about 15 minutes later. I told him the whole thing and he was freaked out. He initially wanted to find the guy so he could beat the shit out of him, but I refused to let him leave my side. He must have apologized 1,000 times during the rest of our trip for not making sure that the door was locked before leaving. But I told him that the day, and that whole trip really, was so rushed, I could see how it happened. We went to the motel management and told them the whole story. The police were obviously called and I gave them a description of the guy so they could see if it was someone who was staying in the motel. After going around to the few motel occupants, they said no one matched his description and concluded he wasn't staying there. Obviously, we were late to the wedding that day, and the whole experience just ruined what should have been a happy time. We planned on staying another day before our long drive home, but we both just wanted out of there as soon as possible. We skipped most of the reception, went back to the motel, packed up, and left. I am usually always so vigilant with locking my doors, especially when I'm home alone. Just goes to show you, all it takes is that one time you forget to check your locks, and that certain unwanted guest is inviting themselves in. This happened 2009 to 2011 when I was 10 to 11 years old. I have 5 siblings and we were driving from Colorado to Arizona with all kids being 5 to 13 and just my mom with us. I remember it being about 10 at night, and my mom was so exhausted that we stopped at a hotel in the middle of nowhere in Utah, being 2 to 3 hours away from where we were originally supposed to stop. We went in, and the guy working the lobby told my mom that there weren't any rooms. Kids were crying or nodding off. Mom was begging him to check again because we were far away from civilization. No idea why the hotel was full, as I remember it being pretty big, but it was. Cue creepy guy. I remember him being late 20s or early 30s, white guy with shaggy brown hair. He had been sitting in the lobby when we came in, but approached my mom when she was nearly in tears at the worker creepy guy. "I have a room you can stay in if you want, Mom." "No, that's okay." Creepy guy. "There's 2 twin beds. It'll be fine." Mom. "Really, it's okay. My husband, Lai, is expecting us at the next stop." Creepy guy. "Here, I have an extra key. You're obviously tired. Come lay down and rest. I'll buy another room for your kids." Being, 10, I didn't see an issue with this, nor did I notice that the guy in the lobby had just said there's no more rooms, so creepy guy couldn't have even gotten a separate room. I just remember the guy insisting even as my mom gathered all us 6 kids and pulled us closer. She thanked the lobby guy and rushed us all out. Creepy guy followed us out the door, insisting that we take his room. Thankfully, Mom had parked out front in the little roundabout, so she practically threw us all in the car and drove off. I remember her sobbing as soon as we got out of the parking lot, but being too scared to pull over. Us kids were obviously confused, asking why we didn't stay. Dumb kid shit like that. Mom explained that that was a creepy guy, and if someone ever does something like that, and we don't know them, don't trust them. We're pretty sure the guy was maybe following us. See a car following us, kept flashing their brights for like the next hour, then turning the lights all the way off and pulling close enough before flashing them on again. The road was empty otherwise. We stopped at a gas station once the guy stopped following us, so my mom could get some coffee so we could make it the rest of the way to our stop. I still remember how terrified my mom was, and how scared we kids were as we turned around in our seats and watched the car following us. Definitely one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me. This is an occurrence that takes me pretty far from the setting of most of my other encounters and finds me in good old Ohio. You see, I was hiatus from my life in general at the time, debating a fresh start in a new corner of the country. I'd been in Ohio before, though only for a short time, and my memories of it were quite fond. I decided to go back there and see if I still felt the same way about it. I was not employed at the time, but I had a substantial source of income due to the fact that I do tattoo work. It was my tattoo work that allowed me to rent an extended stay motel room for the time being, and was unfortunately also the reason that this encounter came to pass. I got a text from somebody who had seen a post about my work. She said her name was Kimberly, and she was interested in getting something done. We talked a bit and compared schedules, all that fun stuff. We were at odds with our timing and decided that I would meet her at her job to further discuss it, and so she could see my portfolio. Kimberly worked at a small deli not too far from my motel, and I headed over there at the appointed time. It seemed as if it was empty, with only one car in the lot other than mine. I grabbed my equipment and went inside, and the little bell rang, and a little Asian man came out to the counter and asked how he could help me. I said that I was looking for Kimberly, and explained that I had business with her. He said, "Sure, hold on," and came out into the lobby area of the deli. Then he went over to the front door, pulled out his keys, and locked it. It was one of those doors that had no other locking mechanism, only the key. I couldn't have left without the key. It was needed both ways. Then he turned to me, and he told me that he was Kimberly, and told me to sit down. I reached into my pocket for my phone, and realized that I had left it in my car. Then I went to the door and tried it anyway, and of course it wouldn't open. The whole time Kimberly was staring at me with a smile. He told me to sit down again, so I did. I asked him why he had locked me in, and he said it was for our safety. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. He looked harmless, and we were in a bad part of town. He started talking about the tattoo, asking questions. He wanted to know if I could do portrait work, and I explained that I could, and that some of my portrait work was shown in the post he'd gotten my info from. He said he needed 7 faces and wanted it to be a whole sleeve. This was beyond the scope of anything we'd discussed, and I told him it could be done, but it would take a while and have to be more than one session. This seemed to make him uncomfortable. He asked how long, and I said I didn't know. It's hard to estimate portrait work as each pick presents its own unique challenges. He asked how many sessions it would take, and I said ideally 1 for each face, but that I might be able to do 2 at a time. Then I asked him who the people were, if they were family. He didn't answer me right away, just got this spacey look in his eyes and seemed to stare through me. After a while, he did start talking. The first one he wanted, he said, was a woman he'd known in high school. I found it strange the way he said it. Like you don't just get casual acquaintances' portraits tattooed on you. You just don't. So I asked why he wanted her tattooed on him, and he told me that it was because she had been his first kill. I just sat there in disbelief, didn't even know what to say. He started talking again after a few minutes. He said that all of the people he wanted portraits of were people that he'd killed. He also said he'd killed more than that, many more, but that these were his favorite ones. I didn't know whether or not to believe him, but given the situation I was in, I didn't really want to find out. I asked him why I should tat these people on him when he'd probably just kill me afterwards too, and he looked legitimately surprised and told me he'd never even considered it. Odd, especially knowing that I knew where he worked. He went on to tell me some really horrific things about what he'd done. Things I won't even repeat here. He gave me names and locations and was going to give me pictures of his victims for the tattoos. He said that before long he would get caught, and he wanted these tats on his arms so that he'd never forget their faces while he was in prison. I don't think that this man felt that I could be any kind of threat to him. He was so casual about everything and wasn't really even defensive in the least. But I grew up in the hood and had done several years in prison and knew how to handle myself. I didn't really even need to know how, as it turned out, because I stood up and hit him once and he fell down, seeming to be unconscious. I took the key from him and unlocked the door and ran to my car and left in a hurry. I called the police to report everything as I drove, and this is where it really gets scary, Imo. They dispatched officers to this deli and sent one to my motel room so I could file a report about everything. The officer that showed up looked puzzled when I told him where it had happened and asked if I was sure. I said I was, and he told me that deli had been closed for a few weeks now because the owner had disappeared. The owner's family apparently believed that the owner had went to Hawaii for whatever reason. I guess he'd told them before that he was thinking about it, but he hadn't been in touch, so they had reported him missing. I told him I was sure and that I had proof. I still had the keys to the place. The cop went pale, looked pretty disturbed, but wouldn't say anything more about it. I gave him the keys and he left. Later on, though that means that I can't mention it here, I found out a few things that were pretty disturbing to me. One of them was that the owner's family hadn't been able to access the deli at all because it was locked up, and they had told the police that the owner had been the only person with keys. I never heard any more about it, but I did a little investigating of my own. I searched all of the names that he told me and got a few things from it. The arrests weren't in this area, but they hadn't been too far away either. The second was a similar story, but several drug charges, And like the other, she wasn't in the area, but wasn't far off either. No hits for missing people under those names at all. Same with the narcotics woman. That, or the people who would possibly report her missing, assumed she was on a binge somewhere and neglected to report her missing. I found nothing at all about the rest that seemed to be related. I don't know what I believe about all this, but I lean towards the possibility that this guy was dead serious. His demeanor, that vacant stare of his, him locking the deli up. His behavior practically screamed that something was wrong. I left Ohio very shortly after this happened and went home. I haven't been back there since. I forgot to mention that the police found the deli empty, but it was now suddenly unlocked. I should have gone and posted that info in the appropriate spot above, but I'm an inherently lazy person, so I just tacked it on to the end here.